champ now. Yes, I didn't say. What are you looking so sad about, champ?
I'm surprised. I mean, I'm really insulted. I mean, that's not right what you just said.
What do you mean? What I just said?
I mean, I'm getting drink of water. I'm late getting home, but you talk. I said something about the greatest heavyweight champ, man. I'm a hometown man, and you talking about Joe Louis, man. Joe Louis wouldn't be nothing for me. Joe, I tell you, Joe, do you think you would have stood a chance with me?
Well, one time in my career, I was on a Formula One tour.
I would have been a bum compared to you.
What's happening, my people? It's Cat Sports again, back for another afternoon with the family. That's right. You know what time it is. If it's Monday through Friday, 2 p.m., it's the Box Storian, bringing you all that boxing history. Boxing is the greatest sport of them all. That's why we love it. Can't get enough of it. Salute to Miss Cass. Without her, none of this would be possible. Salute to William, Old School Ranked, from the Angry White Men podcast. What's up, Old School? Good to see you today. Salute to everyone, and welcome to another episode of Cat Sports, the Box Storian. Today, 30 years of welterweight wars. 30 years of welterweight wars. Has a family today. It's Monday. We right back at the beginning of another big week of boxing history. Got a big week for you too, okay? We got Old School in the building to start the week out. That's a sure sign it's going to be a great week. Hope you feel better, Old School, with your stomach virus. Sit back and enjoy the show. That'll definitely make you feel better. Kensaw Love One in the building. What's up, Kensaw Love One? How are you today? Good to see you. Yeah, We got a number of things today. We're going to start out, look at some welterweight fights from 1993 to 2023, that 30-year period. And going to cover some big fights that happened in that range. And we're going to look at 12 of the best welterweights of the 20th century. We ain't going to talk about Floyd and Oscar and Manny and Bud and all of them, 20th century. Floyd and Oscar came up at the end of the 20th century, but they weren't superstars yet. Okay, there's Jaw. And oh yeah, Jaw, I appreciate that super chat you gave me the other day. I meant to tell you when you was on the chat the other day, but I appreciate it 1,000%, Jaw. Okay. Super chat from Jaw, appreciate it. And me and Jaw probably related. You know, we both from Baltimore, and his grandfather and me had the same last name. My sister said she heard of Eugene Sewell too, so damn, Jaw. We distant cousins. Ain't that something? Wow, small world. Okay. I knew Jaw was one of my favorite peoples. Probably related to me. Yep, his grandfather is a Sewell. Okay. So yeah, we got a number of things. We're gonna look at some of the best welterweights of the 20th century. And then each day at the end of shows now, we're gonna, like we did Friday with the United States, we're gonna do a short history of different countries. Today is gonna be Mexico. Short history of boxing in Mexico. Gonna take another look at the Barrera Morales series. Big show. All that today on Cast Sports The Box Historian, bringing you all of that boxing history. And this weekend, what we got? Is it Wilder this weekend? Oh yeah, Keith. Yeah, I figured Sebastian Fundora was going to beat Keith. You can't play boxing. You can't have 1 or 2 fights in 5 years and then come back against a top level fighter. That's what will happen to you. Okay, April 4th. That's like what, Monday or something? That's not no weekend. Wilder and Derek Chisora. When is the first? Oh yeah, it is Saturday. The first is Wednesday. Yeah, it is Saturday. So yeah, Wilder and Derek Chisora this weekend. Okay. All right. Yeah. So that's the big one. Also, we got the women fighting Lauren Price versus Stephanie Aquino for I think Lauren Price's IBF and WBA welterweight titles. That's also this weekend. And then Sunday, Caroline Dubois in action from London. Okay. She's fighting Terry Harper. Ooh, Caroline going in there against a veteran, putting her WBC women's lightweight title unification. Harper's WBO lightweight title. That'll be a good test for Caroline. Terry Harper been around for a while. Seen all the styles and everything. Ellie Scopely on the card. That's this weekend, right? Oh man, Chantel Cameron on the card. Wow, that is going to be a great card. The women, April 5th, that's Sunday, right? Out of London. Man, that might be the card of the weekend right there. Wow. All right. Mike Mazik in the building. What's up, Mike Mazik? Salute. And Mike Graham in the building. How was everybody's weekend? Hope everybody had a good, safe weekend. Good to see everybody here Monday on the other side of it as we start this big week of boxing history off. Today, we're going to talk about 30 years of welterweight wars, 1990s to now, 2020s, 30 years. And salute Mike Grimm in the building. How are you today, Mike? How was the weekend? And we're going tomorrow, we're going to talk about, like we did the 80s last week, some epic fights from the 90s tomorrow. And then Wednesday, some more in the 90s. We're going to highlight some of the great fighters, some of the pound for pound lists from the 90s. Yeah, way back then, okay? And some of the backgrounds of these great fighters. And then Thursday, I'm surprised we haven't did this before. We're going to look at the history of the Golden Gloves. Thursday. And then this is the first Friday of the month. So the profile this week is going to be an active fighter. The life and career of Jaron Boots Ennis, Friday. All right. Jaron Boots Ennis, Friday. But let's get started with our fight of the day, like we always do. Get this thing kicked off. Today's fight of the day. Didn't miss anyone, did I? We got Mike Rim, Mike Mazik, Jaw, Kensaw Love One, William Old School in the building, and Miss Cass. William Old School from the Angry White Men podcast, Fridays at 10 p.m. Fire podcast. They took off from day one, they up in the space, in the stratosphere now, going full speed ahead. Old School in D1. Okay, but without further ado, today's fight of the day now. Okay, since we're on the welterweight division today, we're going to do a welterweight classic for the fighter today. Sugar Ray Leonard versus Thomas Hearns 1. Okay. September 16th, 1981. The showdown. Hearns Leonard 1. All the way back to 1981, 25 years ago. Simply called the showdown. Okay. The showdown, did it, y'all? Now, the rivalry between Sugar Ray Leonard and Thomas Hearns consisted of two legendary pro boxing fights in 1981 and 1989, pitting two of the greatest welterweight champions of the 1980s against each other in fights that unified titles, drew massive audiences, and exemplified the era's intense competition among the four kings of boxing: Leonard Hearns, Marvin Hagler, and the Hands of Stone, Roberto Duran. Their first fight, billed as simply the Showdown, took place on September 16th, 1981 at Caesar's Palace in Las Vegas, Nevada, where Leonard came in at 146 pounds and as the WBC welterweight champion, challenged Thomas the Hitman Hearns, who came in at 145 pounds, as the undefeated WBA welterweight champion for the undisputed world welterweight title. Leonard had one loss to the aforementioned Roberto Duran. Okay? So Hearns dominated the early rounds with his sharp jab and reach advantage, leading on all scorecards entering the championship rounds. But Leonard rallied dramatically down the stretch, battering Hearns and forcing a TKO at 1 minute 45 seconds of the 14th round in a scheduled 15-round fight. Had it been 12, then Hearns would have won it, but it was 15. The event attracted 23,618 spectators, generated a live gate of $5.9 million and $7.5 million in pay-per-view revenue for a total exceeding $35 million. It was honored as the Ring Magazine's Fight of the Year for 1981. Now remember, that's significant, $35 million, because remember, it was 1981, 25 years ago. Okay? 35 million for a fight back then, generating that kind of money was unheard of. Nearly 8 years later, on June 12, 1989, the rivals met again at Caesar's Palace in a fight billed as The War for Leonard's WBC super middleweight title, with both fighters competing at catch weights, Leonard at 160 pounds and Hearns at 162 pounds. Now that's crazy because no one figured we had to wait 8 years for the rematch. And then the first fight was at welterweight. The rematch was all the way up at super middleweight, catch weight. Leonard 160, Hearns 162, but it was for Leonard's WBC super middleweight title. And this 12-round fight was a brutal back and forth affair marked by heavy exchanges and knockdowns, ending in a very controversial split draw, with judges scoring the fight 113-112 for Leonard, 113-112 for Hearns, and the third headed 112-112. Now, many observers including cast sports and ringside analysts, believe Hearns had done enough to win the fight, but the result allowed Leonard to retain his title while fueling debates about the fighters' legacies. These encounters not only showcase the technical resilience and brilliance of both Hall of Famers, but also highlighted the commercial peak of welterweight boxing in the 1980s. Let's take a look at the two fighters. Short look at the two fighters. Then we're going to get into the fight. First, Sugar Ray Leonard. Now, Sugar Ray Leonard, born Ray Charles Leonard on May 17, 1956, in Rocky Mount, North Carolina, built a formidable amateur boxing foundation in the mid-1970s, highlighted by his gold medal win in the light welterweight division at the 1976 Summer Olympics in Montreal, Canada, where he defeated Cuba's Andres Adama in the final. Yeah, Adama was Cuban, man. That would have been something if he could have turned pro. He would have been right in there with the Four Kings battling all of them. Probably Hagler too at middleweight. But of course, Adama didn't want to defect. He would have never been able to go back home. So never got to see him at the pro level. But Sugar Ray did beat him in that final in the Olympics. And Adama, I think it was 6 fights. Coming into the gold medal match, Adama had won all 5 of his fights by knockout. Sugar Ray had won all 5 of his by shutout. So it was a classic boxer versus puncher final, and Sugar Ray shut him out too. Now, transitioning to the pro ranks, Leonard made his debut on February 5th, 1977 in Baltimore, Maryland. And guess who was there? Yours truly. Defeating Louis Vega by unanimous decision over 6 rounds in Baltimore, Maryland. His early pro successes included a first-round knockout of Andy Price on September 28, 1979 at Caesar's Palace in Las Vegas, showcasing his blistering hand speed and a 4th-round stoppage of England's Dave Boy Green on March 31st, 1980 in Detroit, Michigan, which solidified his status as a top welterweight contender. On November 30th, 1979, Leonard captured the WBC Welterweight Championship with a dramatic 15-round technical knockout over the undefeated Wilfred Benitez back at Caesar's Palace in Las Vegas, marking his first world title in a fight praised for its intensity. Entering 1981, following a rematch victory over Duran, Leonard's pro record stood at 28 wins, 1 loss with 19 knockouts. Let's take a quick look at the hitman, Thomas Hearns. Now, the hitman. Thomas the Hitman Hearns, born on October 18, 1958 in Memphis, Tennessee, and raised in Detroit, Michigan, excelled as an amateur in the city's tough boxing scene, compiling a 155-8 amateur record over 163 fights, and securing multiple Michigan Golden Gloves championships, along with national amateur honors. Hearns turned pro on December 3rd, 1977, demolishing Jerome Hill by first-round knockout in a Detroit undercard fight. He rose meteorically, entering his first title fight with a perfect 28-0 record featuring 26 knockouts. And on August 2nd, 1980, at the Joe Louis Arena in Detroit, he claimed the WBA welterweight title with a devastating second-round TKO of the hard-hitting Pepino Cuevas, whose 35-fight winning streak ended amid Hearns' barrage. Known for his exceptional 78-inch reach, devastating knockout power, particularly in his right hand, and a piston-like jab that controlled distance, Hearns embodied the archetype of a rangy precision puncher. By the time he ended 1981, Hearns' record stood at 32 wins, no losses, with 30 knockouts, reflecting his dominance in the welterweight division. Okay, Thomas the Hitman Hearns. Physically, the two fighters presented a stark contrast that underscored their stylistic clash. Leonard, at 5 feet 10 inches tall with a 74-inch reach, relied on explosive speed, agile footwork, and flurries of combination punches to overwhelm opponents inside. In opposition, the 6'1" Hearns leveraged his significant height and reach advantages to dictate range with his jab while setting up thunderous power shots, particularly his signature right cross. Both entered the fight as well, Leonard had one loss, okay? But both emerged as unbeaten welterweight champions in the late 1970s and early 1980s, representing the pinnacle of the division's golden age. And I believe Hearns had a 78-inch reach. Okay, now let's look at the fight, the showdown. Sugar Ray Leonard versus Thomas the Hitman Hearns. We're just going to look at a summarize like a round by round thing now. Round by round breakdown of this historic fight. For undisputed too, WBA, WBC was undisputed at the time. IBF was just like a couple years away then. Okay. Round by round breakdown. In the opening rounds of the 1981 welterweight unification fight, Thomas Hearns asserted control with his long jab and superior reach, circling the ring to keep Sugar Ray Leonard at a distance and landing crisp punches that disrupted Leonard's rhythm. Hearns won rounds 1 through 5 on all 3 judges' scorecards, leading 50-45 after 5 rounds, as Leonard struggled to close the gap. Early in round 2, Hearns' jab opened a cut above Leonard's left eye, causing immediate swelling that impaired Leonard's vision and forced defensive adjustment, including more head movement and attempts to slip inside for counters. Yeah, that eye was big as a baseball by the end of that fight. And that happened early. And after 5 rounds, Hearns leading 5-0. Okay? So as the fight progressed into the middle rounds, Leonard mounted a comeback by targeting Hearns' body to slow the taller fighter's mobility. In rounds 6 and 7, Leonard landed effective hooks to the midsection and also visibly swelling Hearns' face and earning those rounds on all cards, while Hearns' output dipped. Round 8 was competitive and split among the judges, but Hearns regained momentum in round 9, pressing forward aggressively and taking the round, extending his lead. Hearns was outboxing him beautifully. Yes, he was. From rounds 10 to 12, Hearns maintained resilience despite fatigue, using his jab to keep Leonard at bay. Excuse me. And winning those frames on the judges' scorecards, though Leonard's pressure began forcing exchanges along the ropes. Hearns' defensive footwork and counter right hands showcased his tactical discipline, but Leonard's volume punching started to wear him down. In the championship round, in round 13, Leonard unleashed a furious surge, staggering Hearns with a left hook and driving him into the ropes twice. The first ruled a push, but the second deemed a knockdown, prompting a 9 count as Hearns struggled to rise, earning Leonard a 10-8 round on all cards. Leonard almost had him in 13. Hearns got up at 9. Okay? And so Hearns did not recover between rounds. And Leonard came out of that corner for round 14 like he was shot out of a cannon. There's Hearns through the ropes. Now entering round 14, the scorecard showed Hearns leading 124-122 on one card, 125-122 on another, and 125-121 on the third. So Leonard needed a knockout or a lot of knockdowns because Hearns had 3 and 4 point leads on 2 of the cards with 1 round to go, okay? Had the fight won pretty much. Now Leonard pinned the wary Hearns against the ropes with relentless combinations, including an overhand right that buckled Hearns' legs, leading to Hearns' collapse as he draped over the lower strand on the ropes. Referee Davey Pearl waved off the fight at 1 minute 45 seconds of the 14th round, awarding Leonard a technical knockout victory after a barrage that left Hearns defenseless. And many people say that Davey Pearl stopped it too soon. Yeah. I don't think so, because I think Hearns would have been knocked out cold if David Pearl had to let it go. The old school said back then a loss for a reason, for some get back, unlike today's fighters who take a loss and run away from a rematch. Yeah, go in the other direction, old school. Good point. Yeah, some people said that David Pearl stopped it too soon, but I don't think so. I think Leonard would eventually have stopped Hearns because he still had 2 rounds to go, because he got 1 minute 14 seconds was left in the 14th, and he had the entire 15th round, and Hearns was done. He was hurt, he was tired. Yeah. So David Pearl stopped it. Okay. So this win unified the WBC and WBA welterweight titles, marking Leonard the undisputed champion in the welterweight division, while updating his pro record to 28 wins, 1 loss, with 19 knockouts, while Hearns dropped to 32 wins, 1 loss, with 30 knockouts. And there's your winner, Sugar Ray Leonard, of the Fighters a Day. Leonard Hearns won. And Hearns really outboxed Sugar Ray twice, because he outboxed him again in the rematch in 1989. And they called it a draw. He dropped Leonard 2 times. You know, what more do you have to do? Yeah. Many people thought Hearns won that, but the judges didn't, and that's what counts. Sugar Ray was the All-American gold medal winner, so you know. Yeah. Okay, so today is going to be 30 years of welterweight wars. First, we're going to start out with a little quick historical background to the welterweight division. Okay? The historical background first. There's Manny and Juan Manuel. 4th fight. Manny already out. Yeah, Manny is already out, man. Look at him. Yeah. Juan Manuel, a lot of people said that he got robbed a couple times, so Juan Manuel didn't take no chances in that 4th fight. And Manny almost had him out earlier in that round. I think it was the 6th. Remember old school? Manny almost had Juan Manuel out of there earlier in the round and walked right into that overhand right. That's why I said when I was doing the Manny fantasy matchup, if he fought Irvin prior, Manny was always running in there. He would run right into something, just like he did against Juan Manuel. He ran right into that right overhand right, and his momentum did most of the damage to itself. He's out already. Let's look at a historical background of the welterweight division first. Now, the welterweight division originated in the late 19th century amid boxing's shift from unregulated bare knuckle fights to structured weight class competitions in Britain and the United States. As the sport gained popularity post-1880s, organizers recognized this need to match fighters of similar sizes to reduce injuries and enhance fairness, with welterweight emerging to fill the gap between lightweight and middleweight. Okay, because they had 135 to 160, like a 25, didn't have no juniors and supers, like a 25-pound gap in there, so they put welterweight at 147 to make it fighters, a little bit more fairer in weights, okay? So they dropped welterweight right between lightweight and middleweight. Now, the National Sporting Club in London initially set an early limit around 140 pounds in 1890. It started out at 140, influencing early fights, while Paddy Duffy's 1888 victory over Jack Dempsey marked the first recognized world title, legitimizing the class during an era of informal rules and growing American interest. Yeah, we're going to talk about Paddy Duffy later in the show, too, the first ever welterweight champion. All about the welterweights today. And that Jack Dempsey beat for the first title, that wasn't the heavyweight Jack Dempsey. That was a guy called himself the Non-Imperial Jack Dempsey, middleweight, or welterweight middleweight. And that's who the heavyweight Jack Dempsey actually named himself after. Okay. So because his first name wasn't Jack, I forgot his real first. The 1920 Walker Law in New York, formalizing a 147-pound limit to combat corruption and promote professional licensing. So in 1920 was when they officially went to 147. This legislation named after New York State Senator James J. Walker, extended nationwide, aligning with the Marquis of Queensberry rule, emphasis on glove fight. Pioneers like Barbados Joe Walcott and Teddy Lewis dominated the 1910s to the 1920s, with Lewis and Jack Britton engaging in a record 20 times they fought. Many of them was for the welterweight title, showcasing the division's grueling schedules. The 1930s to the 1940s saw Henry Armstrong's unprecedented simultaneous three-division reign, including 19 successful straight welterweight defenses from 1938 to 1940, highlighting the era's 10 straight successful title defenses, Homicide Hank. Okay? So, post-World War II welterweight flourish with Sugar Ray Robinson's 1946 title win and 5 defenses until 1951, setting technical benchmarks. The 1960s to the 1970s featured Jose Napoles' multiple reigns and Emil Griffith's 3-time championships, while the 1980s Four Kings era, again Sugar Ray Leonard, Thomas Hearns, Roberto Duran, with Hagler at middleweight, produced iconic rivalries like Leonard Hearns had won in 1981, our fighters of the day. In the modern era, from the 1990s up to now, included Oscar De La Hoya's 1997 WBC win and Floyd Mayweather's undefeated streak, 50-0, reflecting commercialization and global expansion. This timeline illustrates welterweight's evolution from nascent category to boxing's glamour division, shaped by regulatory milestones, legendary figures, and cultural shifts. Okay, let's get to talking about some of these fights. We got 30 years of welterweight wars. Okay. Oh shoot. "30 years of welterweight wars." There we go. Excuse me for 1 second. I need some more light. Let there be light. There be light. On the way back, I gotta get through that minefield. It's Miss Cass part of the room over there. I got a little office in the corner of the bedroom, and you could seriously hurt yourself over there on Miss Cass. Okay, I hope she ain't on it. Okay, let's go. Okay, 30 years of welterweight wars. Now again, the 147-pound division has always been a hotbed of elite talent, with old-time legends like Ted Kid Lewis and Jack Britton. They fought each other 30 times, remember. You got the golden age greats like Sugar Ray Robinson and Kid Gavilan, and the modern era kings like Roberto Duran, Sugar Ray Leonard, and Thomas Hearns, all leaving their mark on the division. So today, we will review a number of fights in the division between 1993 and 2023. From Whitaker versus Chavez, to Manny versus Floyd, to Terence Crawford versus Earl Spence Jr. Yeah, we got 30 years. We're going to start in 1993 with PERNELL Whitaker versus Julio Cesar Chavez. And we're going to stop at 2023 with Terence Bud Crawford versus Earl the Truth Spence, and many great fights in between. So let's get started now. 30 years of welterweight wars and some other things too. The first one is PERNELL Whitaker versus Julio Cesar Chavez, September 10th, 1993. Okay. Now, this fight was billed simply as the fight. The mega fight between Mexican icon, JC Superstar, and WBC champion, Sweet Pea Whitaker, was set to crown the consensus #1 fighter in the game, a contestant at a catch weight of 145 pounds to accommodate Chavez, who was moving up from 140. The matchup still compares favorably with any in history in terms of pure pugilistic pedigree. Now, both were 3-weight champions coming in, with Chavez entering on an incredible 87-fight undefeated streak, and Whitaker, the 1984 Olympic gold medalist, carrying a single undeserved points loss in 33 fights. But sadly, after Whitaker completely outboxed Chavez in a masterful display, the Americans' pound-for-pound coronation was denied by scandalous scorecards that returned a majority draw verdict. Scandalous, man, scandalous. That was the Sports Illustrated, came out once a week. That was the cover the very next week. Robbed. Yeah, that was terrible, the way they did Sweet Pea. And the one loss he had against Jose Luis Ramirez was also undeserved. He won that fight. 30 years of welterweight wars. Oscar De La Hoya versus PERNELL Whitaker. April 12th, 1997. Now, robbed of victory against Chavez, Whitaker nevertheless had the satisfaction of gaining wide recognition as the sport's true pound-for-pound king. Now, Sweet Pea made a further 6 defenses over the ensuing 4 years, even squeezing in a foray north to junior middleweight to become a 4-weight champion. But in the meantime, a new superstar, the Golden Boy, emerged on the scene. And like Whitaker, Oscar De La Hoya was an Olympic gold medalist and multi-weight champion, capturing titles from super featherweight to 147, en route to 23 straight victories coming into the Whitaker fight. Over 12 tightly contested rounds, Oscar fought aggressively against Sweet Pea. And Sweet Pea's slippery and sublime defensive skills, and despite failing to put a serious dent in the defending champion, the judges were impressed enough to award the young superstar a unanimous decision. Okay, Oscar got a unanimous win in that one. Now we're entering the Oscar phase of the list because Oscar was the cash cow then, and you know, Oscar fight was probably your biggest payday, and Oscar wanted all the smoke. Anybody who wanted it could get it. That's why it's so surprising he running that protection racket nowadays. Oscar had one of them 1930 resumes. Oscar De La Hoya versus Ike Corte, February 13th, 1999. Ike got Oscar on the mat. Oscar put him down too, to be fair. I think it was both in the same round. Now, following his crowning, somewhat controversial win over Whitaker, Oscar was not only the biggest attraction outside of the heavyweight division, he was also a leading contender along with Roy Jones Jr. for the title of boxing's best pound-for-pound fighter. And after 5 successful defenses, including a repeat win over an aging Julio Cesar Chavez, the Golden Boy took on his most daunting challenge yet, Ike Bazooka Corte. Ike came in undefeated in 35 fights with 7 defenses of the WBA title. And Ike brought a formidable skill set, including boxing's most potent jab and thudding power behind it. The Ghanaian proved his worth, exchanging knockdowns in round 6 and pushing the American superstar all the way until a final round blitz from Oscar sealed a hard-fought split decision. Okay, yeah. Great fight. Oscar got that one by split decision over Ike Corte. Felix Trinidad versus Oscar De La Hoya, September 18th, 1999. Tito and Oscar. Okay. Yeah, old school says that's why the best have to face the best, so we know who is who. That's right. And old school says Sweet Pea was a boxing genius and had probably the top IQ in boxing. And his defense was a whole different level than anyone in boxing today. That's true, old school. Yeah. Whole different level. So now we had Oscar and Tito. The Oscars went over Cortez. Left only one meaningful fight left in the division. A mega showdown with rival, undefeated IBF champion, Felix Tito Trinidad. Over a 6-year title reign, the fearsome Puerto Rican puncher had swept aside 15 challenges, 13 by knockout. And this fight was billed as the fight of the millennium. Oscar versus Tito matched two superstars at the peak of their powers in the most eagerly anticipated fight in a generation. Unfortunately, it failed to deliver the expected drama between the ropes, right? Didn't fail to deliver. As Oscar boxed his way to an early lead before easing off and allowing Tito to snatch a controversial razor-thin majority decision. The Oscar took his feet off the gas coming down the stretch, and they said his team told him to do that. Got to finish, Oscar. You got to finish, my boy. So yeah, Tito took a split decision from Oscar. Then yeah, so Oscar was fighting everybody though, because Shane Mosley versus Oscar De La Hoya. Okay, this was June 17th, 2000. And Oscar was the cash cow, so everybody was clamoring for that Oscar fight. And they didn't have to clamor hard because Oscar was obliging. Come on, let's do it. So the fact Oscar appears for a fourth time on the list of welterweight super fights is a testament both to the Golden Boy's selling power and his willingness to test himself against the best of his era. Yeah, that's what I was just talking about. That's why it's so surprising. Like I said, he's running this protection racket now. Oscar had one of them 1930s, 40s resumes. Now, following the disappointment of his defeat to Felix Trinidad, Oscar chased a rematch. But when a deal couldn't be reached and Tito elected to move up in weight, Oscar was awarded the WBC title again by default. So seeking redemption against a named opponent, he took on the highly touted Sugar Shane Mosley instead. Yeah, at the Tito fight, Oscar tried to get the rematch from Tito, but Tito moved up. So Oscar wanted to redeem himself against a name, so he got in there with Sugar Shane, okay? Now Sugar Shane, the undefeated former lightweight champion, was regarded as one of the most talented fighters in boxing at the time. And he delivered a career-best performance to outshine his Los Angeles-based rival in a brilliant back-and-forth classic. Sugar Shane got a majority decision. The one judge had it a draw, but the other two gave it to Sugar Shane. Sugar Shane got a majority decision over Oscar. And then after that fight, we had some undisputed chaos in the division, right? That's Jude Spence. The belt started bouncing around and stuff. Now, undisputed chaos, let's talk about that. And with the signature win over Oscar, Sugar Shane was briefly recognized as boxing's #1 pound-for-pound king. But what looked like the beginning of a dominant reign, in fact, sparked a tumultuous period in the welterweight division's lineage, as Sugar Shane was overthrown by rival Vernon Forrest, who in turn was promptly knocked out by WBA champion Ricardo Mayorga, who was then outpointed by IBF champion Corey Spinks, thus crowning the first undisputed welterweight champion since Lloyd Huntington in 1986. 14 years, right? It was 3 belts then. WBA, WBC, IBF. Corey Spinks, but they went over Mayorga, had all 3 of them. And it was the first time since 86 when Huntington beat Donald Curry. But then after Huntington beat Curry in protest to apartheid in South Africa, Huntington threw all the belts in the trash. And then they ended up in all different hands again. In 2014 years later, Corey Spinks was the first undisputed champion since then. And the titles would not remain unified for long, though, as Spinks was himself knocked out in his 3rd defense by Zab Judah, and then the belts got fragmented again. Ended up in all different hands again after that, right? Okay, so then 30 years of welterweight wars. Floyd Mayweather Jr. versus Ricky Hatton. Floyd versus the Hitman Hatton. December 8th, 2007. Call this the check hook fight. That was the beginning of the end for Ricky, that check hook. Now, moving up to welterweight in 2005, pound for pound star Floyd Mayweather Jr. first took care of business with bitter rival Zab Judah before scoring an easy win over Carlos Baldomir to collect the WBC strap. A blockbuster fight against Oscar at 154 pounds followed, and then money returned to welterweight to take on Britain's Ricky Hatton in another massive pay-per-view event. The Hitman Hatton, an undefeated champion at 140 and highly touted on most pound-for-pound lists, fought valiantly, despite referee Joe Cortez stifling the action at times. If Joe Cortez kept stopping the fight, I don't know what he was doing. Remember? Now, Floyd remained cool and composed amid the electric atmosphere, took the steam out of Hatton's assault, and put on a punching clinic to score a 10th round stoppage. Yeah, that check hook was the beginning of the end. Now we get to the cheater portion of the list. Antonio Margarito. Yeah, we're going to address that picture in a moment after the next fight. Antonio Margarito versus Miguel Cotto won July 26, 2008. So when Floyd announced his retirement after the Hatton win, no one believed or expected he would be gone for long. But it still left a vacancy atop the welterweight division. Now with Miguel Cotto, the undefeated WBA champion and Puerto Rican star, and Antonio Margarito, a rock-hard Mexican, long touted as the most avoided man in the division, stepped in to fill the void. Now, Cotto got off to a great start, taking the lead with his smoother and craftier boxing. But Margarito chugged forward relentlessly, ominously, and as the damage accrued on Cotto's face, it was clear he simply could not hold off the marauding Mexican. Finally, after twice taking a knee in a bruising 11th round, Cotto was rescued by the referee from further punishment, and Margarito was the new welterweight ruler. More on that in a minute, okay? So then, Shane Mosley versus Antonio Margarito, January 24th, 2009. And this was because you know how when the hands getting wrapped, a member of the opposing team is allowed to come in there and watch it. And Shane Mosley's team sent trainer Nassim Richardson, and he saw something wrong with the hand wraps and come find out Margarito putting plaster Paris in them, you know. When it gets mixed with water, it gets hard. And, you know, as your hands get moist in them gloves, that plaster Paris turned into cement. So they would say, whoa. So he had to fight fairly and got beat down. In the wake of Mark, and then you go back and look at this fight, it always was something about the wounds on Cotto's face, you know, like, you know, fists usually cause cuts. They don't usually cause no bruises like that. That was that plaster Paris. Mm-hmm. Now, it was never proved he had plaster Paris in this fight, but that puts all of his fights in question. How many fights where you do it and didn't get caught? All of them, one of them, 10 of them, who knows? But once you get caught, that puts every fight you had in question, right? And I think, what I can tell you this after this fight, took Shane Mosley versus Antonio Margarito, January 24th, 2009. So, in the wake of Margarito's performance against Miguel Cotto, the Mexican was hailed as an irrepressible force, a terminator that couldn't be stopped. In contrast, Tucker Shane's form had been up and down in the years since his breakout win against Oscar. And the result of the fight between Shane Mosley and Antonio Margarito seemed a foregone conclusion. Everybody thought Margarito was going to beat him down like he did Cotto. But in the hoopla surrounding the Margarito beatdown of Cotto, it seemed the world had forgotten that Sugar Shane Mosley could actually fight. Far from wilting under the Mexican's pressure, Sugar Shane stood his ground and blasted away with brutal right hands and rapid fire combinations, round after one-sided round. In a punch-perfect performance, they made a mockery of so many pre-fight predictions. Dane Mosley, 9th round TKO. Let's do a little before and after now. This was before he got caught cheating, Margarito, right? This is after he got caught cheating. The picture tells 1,000 words. Before he got caught cheating, look at him dominating. After he got caught cheating, getting beat down. So that says a lot about Antonio Margarito. Do the math. I think that once the fighter, like PEDs, some things you do, the suspension is warranted. But something like that, putting that plaster price in your hand wraps, that should be lifetime banishment automatically. Because fighters have got killed just in their fair with just your hands and the hand wraps inside the gloves. Fighting fairly, fighters have lost their lives. This fool in there putting cement in his gloves, that should be lifetime banishment there, man. Do not pass go. No questions asked. He should be banned for life. But he was allowed to come back. But yeah, before the cheating, after the cheating. Okay? When he had to fight on even grounds, he got beat down. Okay, the next one is Manny Pacquiao versus Miguel Cotto, November 14th, 2009. We're winding down on this. Then we got some of the best welterweights of the 20th century, all welterweights today. But Pacquiao Cotto, November 14th, 2009. Now, when Floyd retired, it left Manny briefly unopposed atop the boxing's pound-for-pound tree. The Filipino looked phenomenal in a run of back-to-back wins that included blasting and laying a beatdown on the ghost of Oscar De La Hoya. But in taking on top welterweight Miguel Cotto at a catch weight of 145 pounds, it remained to be seen, was it a former flyweight 112-pounder? Manny was biting off more than he could chew. But in fact, it proved to be one of the Pac-Man's best ever performances, as the Puerto Rican was floored twice and ground down and stopped in round 12 by the Filipino fireball. We thought Manny Pacquiao was great, opined Larry Merchant, but he's better than we thought. Yeah, Larry Merchant, I never liked Larry Merchant that much, but I give him his props. He called fights fairly. You know, he called the action like what's happening. You know, like now you're watching a fight and you think you might be on the wrong channel because what's happening in the ring is not what the commentators are saying. But Larry Merchant always called fights right, you know. And he had his biases though. He didn't like Floyd, he didn't like AP, but he did call the fights like they were happening. Okay, remember he told Floyd, if I was 50 years younger, I'd kick your ass, Floyd. Larry probably would have tried too if he was 50 years younger. Mm-hmm. Now, Floyd, he lucky Roger wasn't still living in there. Roger would have said, try me, I'm closer to your age. Now, Floyd Mayweather Jr. versus Sugar Shane Mosley, May 1st, 2010. If Floyd got rocked in that one. Sugar Shane caught it with them right hands. I got up and started walking toward the TV. I said, oh no. Floyd went into the ropes and bounced back, and Floyd clung on for dear life like he was glued to Sugar Shane. Floyd wasn't let go. Sugar Shane probably like, get off me, get off me. Floyd's like, no. But Floyd versus Sugar Shane, May 1st, 2010. Now, Floyd's self-imposed hiatus from the ring had been predictably brief. And in late 2009, he made his return with a lopsided win over lightweight ruler Juan Manuel Marquez. I think Floyd retired in 2009. Retired when he did because everybody would start talking about him fighting Paul Williams. Floyd retired. He didn't want to get in there with Paul. Mm-hmm. Yep. But anyway, that's what I think. That's my theory on it. But he came back in 2009 and had a lopsided win over Juan Manuel Marquez. Now, Super Showdown with Manny Pacquiao should have followed the Marquez fight. But when negotiations fell apart due to disagreements over drug testing, Floyd opted instead to face Sugar Shane Mosley. Now, this fight had been mooted for years, and though past his prime, Sugar Shane was nevertheless coming off his great win over Margarito. And in the second round, a huge upset looked imminent, as Sugar Shane twice rocked Floyd to the soles of his boots with flush right hands. Floyd clung on for dear life before recovering in the third round and taking control of the fight, and then dominated the remainder. Floyd by unanimous decision. But yeah, man, I thought Sugar Shane had it. Sugar Shane probably went through the whole training camp in the first couple of rounds, waiting to get that right hand in. And he got it in, but he didn't get the job done. But he got it in. But Floyd bounced off them ropes and grabbed Sugar Shane. So he's going to squeeze Sugar Shane to death. But he recovered and took over. Okay, Juan Manuel Marquez versus Manny Pacquiao 4. This is the final fight between them. December 8th, 2012. December 8th, 2012. Now, over 3 fights, beginning with their remarkable draw in 2004 in the first fight at featherweight, it was almost impossible to split the Mexican and Filipino rivals. A second and third meeting at 130 in 2008 and 147 in 2011. So Pacquiao emerged victorious by close, contentious decisions. Now, both men promised to end the rival in definitive fashion, and they did not disappoint. Pacquiao bitterly disputed loss to Tim Bradley in his previous fight. Remember that one? Yeah. Tim said, "Who me?" when they announced his name as beating Pacquiao. Pacquiao's bitterly disputed loss to Tim Bradley in his previous fight meant no title was on the line against Marquez, but it did not matter, as they produced arguably the fight of the decade. Floored heavily in the third round, a surging Pacquiao roared back to knock Marquez down in the fifth round and looked on the verge of scoring a stoppage win in the sixth round before walking right into a monster overhand right that left him out cold, face down on the canvas. Yep, man, he walked right into that, man. Yeah, I think he was out already. Right here. But he was definitely out right here. Look at Marquez. Marquez didn't celebrate right away neither. Marquez was like, damn, did I kill Manny? He didn't celebrate right away. Look at him looking at him. Like, move, man, do something, move. Yeah, Manny was out. He should have just draped the blanket over and put a pillow on his head and just cut the lights out. Turn out the lights. Yeah, that was a bad one there. Okay. So the next fight was, got a couple more. We're going to go to the welterweight, greatest welterweights of the 20th century. Okay, Floyd again, the big one. Floyd Mayweather versus Manny Pacquiao. May 2nd, 2015. May the 2nd, 2015. Okay. Now, it took 5 years of bickering and public posturing, but eventually, the two biggest stars in boxing hammered out a deal. The Pacquiao's lost to Marquez 3 years earlier, and the rivals' advancing ages had taken some of the shine off the matchup, but it still pitted the two best pound-for-pound fighters of a generation against each other, and was by far the biggest box office event in history. Now, the fight itself was absorbing, though failed to produce the kind of action it promised at their athletic peaks. Now, aside from a fourth-round flurry, Pacquiao was largely nullified by Floyd's superior boxing, and the American took a comfortable decision, along with bragging rights, as the best boxer of the era. Yeah, Floyd got the unanimous decision. And finally, 2023 was Terence Crawford versus Errol Spence Jr. Final fight after 30 years of welterweight wars. Bud versus the Truth. July 29th, 2023. Finally, the most recent high-profile welterweight showdown that attracted the interest of millions of sports fans was a long-awaited clash between rival champions Terence Bud Crawford and Errol the Truth Spence. In front of some 20,000 fans at the T-Mobile Arena in Las Vegas, Nevada. And what was viewed by many as a pick-em fight turned out to be a one-sided beatdown, as Crawford gave one of the great ring performances of recent years, scoring knockdowns in rounds 2 and 7 before the referee stopped the slaughter in round 9. Now, when the lights are brightest, great fighters step up and do great things. In the biggest fight of his career at that point, in front of an electrified crowd at the T-Mobile Arena in Las Vegas, Terence Bud Crawford stepped up in a major way and produced a masterclass performance that will be significant in defining his legacy. Now, on paper, Spence versus Crawford appeared an evenly matched clash between two world champions. But in actuality, Bud proved to be levels above, completely dominating his rival and winning by 9th round stoppage to become the undisputed king of the welterweight division. Bud Crawford, okay? Everybody thought it was fair. I had picked Earl. I ain't gonna lie, I picked Earl. But wow, was I wrong? But I wasn't the only one. There was a lot of people wrong. Okay? Now, sadly, at the moment, the welterweight division appears rather depleted, and no compelling superstar matchups looks to be on the horizon. Hopefully, that will change in the near future. But in the meantime, we have all the great welterweight battles of the past 30 years that we just discussed to remember and watch and relive online. Okay? So now let's look at the first ever welterweight champion. His name was Paddy Duffy. First ever welterweight to win a title. There's Paddy Duffy back in 1888. He beat the non-power Jack Dempsey. Not the famous heavyweight Jack Dempsey. This was the first Jack Dempsey. Let's take a look at Paddy. The first, I think, was it Paddy Duffy and Jack Britton fought 20 times in the welterweight division. Many of them for world titles. Mm-hmm. Yep. Tomorrow we got some fights from the 90s. Wednesday, we're going to talk more about the 90s fighters, their legacies, you know, like Roy Jones, B-Hop, some of these fighters, James Lights Out Tony, Michael Second to None, all those guys. Wednesday. Thursday, a history of the Golden Gloves. Can't believe we have never done that show. And it's the first Friday of the month, so we're going to talk about an profile of active fighter this week. It's going to be Teron Boots Ennis. Life and career, Teron Boots Ennis Friday. Okay. But right now, the first ever welterweight world champion, Paddy Duffy. Okay, excuse me for 1 minute, please. Okay. I gotta go back to this minefield again. Gotta keep your eyes on a swivel over here. Yeah. Well, Miss Cash side of the room, you gotta keep your head on a swivel. You might run into anything. You could lose your life over there. Okay, here we go. Paddy Duffy. Okay, Paddy Duffy. How you doing, Miss Cash? Now, Paddy Duffy, he was an Irish-American pro boxer from Boston, Massachusetts, widely recognized as the first ever world welterweight champion under the Marquis of Queensberry rules. He was born to Irish immigrant parents. He began his boxing career in 1884 at the age of 19, quickly establishing himself as a formidable fighter in the welterweight division during the sport's transition to glove fights. Duffy's pro record stood at 34 wins, 3 losses, and 16 draws, with 16 knockouts across 53 fights, spanning 1884 to 1889. Duffy's career highlights included his debut knockout victory over Skin Doherty in 1884, followed by a series of successful fights on the East Coast against notable opponents like Paddy Sullivan and Jack McGinty. In 1888, he captured the vacant world welterweight title by defeating English champion William McMillan by foul in the 17th round near Fort Foote, Virginia, south of Washington, D.C., marking him as a pioneer in the weight class and the first ever welterweight champion. Okay. He defended the title once, defeating Australian champion Tom Meadows by disqualification after 45 grueling rounds in San Francisco in 1889, after which Duffy retired from the ring at age 24. Tragically, Duffy's life was cut short by tuberculosis, from which he died at age 25 in Boston. Despite his brief tenure, his contributions to welterweight boxing earned him induction into the International Boxing Hall of Fame in 2008 at the Pioneer Era inductee. You got to hit the first ever champion in there. Significant. Duffy's legacy endures as a symbol of the rough and tumble origins of modern boxing, influencing sports development in the late 19th century. Paddy Duffy, the first ever welterweight champion. All about the welterweight division today. Okay, so now we're going to look at some of the best welterweights of the 20th century. Okay, 20th century. All right, that's next. There's two of the great ones there. Sugar Ray and the Hitman, Thomas Herman. That was the fight of the day right there. Remember? Okay, so let's take a look at this. Some of the best welterweights of the 20th century now. Yeah. So is Keith done? Or is he coming back for more? All he can do is be a gatekeeper or something now. He ain't beating no top level fighters. No. Mm-mm. No way. Okay, so let's look at these welterweights. Some of the best welterweights of the 20th century. Okay. Ted Kid Lewis. Ted Kid Lewis. And without question, one of the finest pugilists to ever emerge from the British Isles. Lewis had some 300 fights before all was said and done, fighting from bantamweight to light heavyweight. His greatest wins were in 147, where he won 3 world titles, battling for it repeatedly against hated rival Jack Britton, fought him 20 times, won the title 3 different times. Him and Jack Britton fought 20 times at welterweight. And next is, guess who? Jack Britton. They called Britton the boxing marvel, and for good reason. A true ring master, this prolific champion with 37 title fights to his credit, made up for his lack of serious punching power with technical ability and ring smarts. He bested such top talents as Michael Dowd, Charlie White, Mickey Walker, and his greatest rival, of course, Ted Kid Lewis. And Jack Britton was in 37 title fights in his career. Wow. It's got to be the record or something. 37 of them. Nakes, Thomas the Hitman Hearns. We're looking at some of the greatest welterweights of the 20th century. Thomas the Hitman Hearns. The gifted fighter they called the Motor City Cobra or the Hitman rendered helpless such top welterweight talents as Angel Espada, Pepino Cuevas, and Randy Shields before giving Sugar Ray Leonard one of his roughest fights, defeating Wilfred Benitez and knocking out Roberto Duran. He would later become the first fighter in boxing history to win world titles in 4 and 5 different weight classes. The Hitman. Let's put a brief summary. Y'all know I'm not gonna bore y'all. Looking at some of the best welterweights of the 20th century now. No Oscar, Floyd, Bud, none of them. 20th century. Now Oscar and Bud fought in the 20th century, but they wasn't stars then. They was just beginning their careers. Also, Oscar won Fighter of the Year in 1996, and he fought 4 top 10 contenders. He could have fought 2 lower level contenders and 2 top 10, not Oscar. Oscar fought 4 top 10 contenders that year. Had to give him Fighter of the Year. Okay. Jose Napales is next. That's Jose on the right. Customato fighter. Slick, smooth, and potent. Mantequilla, which means butter. Was a complete fighter and a dominant champion. Top shelf battlers. Curtis Cokes, Hegemon Lewis, Ernie Lopez, Emil Griffith, Clyde Gray, Billy Backus, and Armando Muniz are among those who felt in Napales' unique combination of skill and power. I think this Emil Griffith is fighting right there. Okay. Next, the great Jimmy McLarnin. Jimmy McLarnin. Jimmy got doing jump rope, I think. Yeah, Jimmy McLarnin. Call him the murderous Mick, the Belfast Spider, the baby-faced assassin, or the Hebrew Scourge. But whatever you call him, know that you're talking about one of the greats of the prize ring. A 2-time welterweight champion, McLarnin boasts wins over such fellow luminaries as Lou Ambers, Barney Ross, Tony Canzonieri, Billy Petrol, Fidel LaBarber, Charles Bud Taylor, and young Corbett III, the great Jimmy McLarnin. Next, the legendary Kid Gavilan. Talking about some of the best welterweights of the 20th century, Kid Gavilan. The Cuban Hawk, owner of both the famous Bolo Punch and one of pugilism's hardest chins, was a prolific and popular battler during the 1940s and 50s, notching wins over a who's who of great fighters, including Bojack, Billy Graham, Carmen Basilio, Tony Gennaro, Johnny Bratton, Ralph Tiger Jones, and Ike Williams. He also gave Sugar Ray Robinson 2 of his toughest fights of his career and held the world title from 1951 to 1954 before losing it to Johnny Saxton under most dubious circumstances. Yes, Saxton was a mob fighter. Kid Gavilan wouldn't play ball with the mob, and Kid Gavilan wasn't a fight. But you know, the mafia, they had a stranglehold on boxing. If you couldn't get the fighter to play ball, they had the judges in their pocket. So, yeah. So, you know, the judges gave it to who the mob wanted them to give it to. Okay? Yeah. They had a stranglehold on it. Like I said, you couldn't get the fighter to play ball. We already got the judges. And they told some fighters, if you don't do what we want you to do, you can win this fight 12 rounds to nothing. You're not getting a decision. Okay? Straight up told you, and the fighters didn't. Barney Ross. That's Barney on the left. The great Barney Ross. A truly heroic figure in boxing history. Ross was smart, cagey, and incredibly tough. One of boxing's first Triple Crown champions. Ross defeated a long list of great battlers, including Jimmy McLarnin, Tony Canzonieri, Seferino Garcia, Batten and Battolino, Billy Petrol, and Frankie Click. Okay? Emil Griffith. After the fight where Benny Bass died, Emil was never really the same. That's Emil on the right there. Yeah. He had great power, but I think after the fight, Benny Bass died against Griffith. I don't think Griffith had another knockout in his career after that. I don't think so, yeah. He was never the same. Emil Griffith. Arguably, the greatest boxer of the 1960s, pound for pound. Griffith was an outstanding talent, competing at the elite level for more than 15 years and amassing victories over such excellent fighters as Luis Rodriguez, Benny Parrott, not Benny Bass. Benny Parrott was the fighter that died against him. Benny Parrott, Ralph Dupas, Don Former, Dick Tiger, Joey Archibald, and Nino Benvenuti. Yeah, Emil Griffith. Yeah, he was never the same after. That's Emil on the right. After the Benny Parrott fight. Sugar Ray Leonard. Sugar Ray Leonard in the house. Talking about some of the greatest welterweights of all time now. Gotta have both Sugar Rays on there. Presiding over one of the strongest of welterweight fields in the 80s, Leonard's run from 1977 to 1982 is unquestionably one of the most impressive in division history. Astonishingly fast and powerful, Ray defeated Hall of Fame champions Wilfred Benitez, Roberto Duran, and Thomas Hearns, before later moving up to conquer Marvelous Marvin Hagler at middleweight. But yeah, he didn't win that fight. He knew he didn't. He wouldn't give Hagler the rematch, would he? Barbados Joe Walcott. Barbados Joe Walcott was the first black welterweight champion. First black welterweight champion. The hard-hitting Barbados Demon stood just over 5 feet tall, but he not only beat middleweights and even heavyweights, but was also a welterweight world champion with wins over Mysterious Billy Smith and Young Peter Jackson before he lost his title to the Dixie Kid under the most suspicious of circumstances. Because in that fight, remember we talked about this last week when he fought the Dixie Kid. Guess who had bet money on the Dixie Kid? The referee. So the referee made sure the Dixie Kid won. He had money on the Dixie Kid. Wow, that's crazy. So he lost that fight under the most suspicious of circumstances, with the referee having money on his opponent. Okay, outside the welterweight division, he more than held his own against the likes of George Gardner, Sam Langford, Joe Gans, Philadelphia Jack O'Brien, and Joe Chomsky. Those questioning his high ranking here must take note of the fact that both Jack Johnson and Sam Langford rated Barbados Joe Walcott as the most powerful puncher of their time, of that era back then. Sam Langford and Jack Johnson, two of the bigger names back then. Next is the toy bulldog, Mickey Walker. Number 2, right behind Sugar Ray Robertson. Talking about the best welterweights. Mickey Walker is number 2, deservedly so. The toy bulldog. Few do not rank the toy bulldog among the greatest fighters of all time, pound for pound. And it was as a welterweight that Walker did his best work, with wins over Jack Britton, Pete Latzo, Lou Tendler, Sailor Friedman, Mike Mateague, and Dave Shade, before he moved up to battle Harry Greb, Tiger Flowers, Tommy Lockson, Maxie Rosenblum, and Jack Sharkey. And remember we talked about him and Harry Greb for the middleweight, and after the fight, they both went to a bar close to the arena, had the rematch that had the rematch that night in the bar. They got into an argument. So they had an immediate rematch, but it just happened at a bar down the street from the arena later that night. Wow. And of course, number one, Mr. Pound for Pound himself, Sugar Ray Robinson. Sugar Ray Robinson. One of the remarkable things about the great Sugar Ray Robinson is that the welterweight division boasts such an outstanding roster of excellent fighters, and yet no one dreams of doubting the original Sugar Ray is the king of all. He surveys at 147. Everybody puts him number one at 147. Mostly number one all time in any weight, pound for pound. The immortal Sugar Ray Robinson showed his greatness in wins over Kid Gavilan, Tommy Bell, Jake LaMotta, Fritzy Zivic, Sammy Engat, Georgie Abrams, and Charlie Fusari before moving up to rule the middleweight division and giving us so many great battles against the likes of Carmen Basilio, Gene Former, Randy Turpin, and Carl Bobo Austin. And some honorable mentions at this great welterweights, honorable mentions. Luis Rodriguez, Carmen Basilio, the Dixie Kid, Wilfred Benitez, Billy Graham, Young Peter Jackson, Curtis Coates, Tommy Bell, Jackie Fields, Donald Curry, Seferino Garcia, Fritzy Zivic, Young Corbett III, Mysterious Billy Smith, Carlos Palomino, Marlon Starling, Pepino Cuevas, Honey Melody, and the Coco Kid. Yeah, some honorable mentions. These were the greatest welterweights of the 20th century. Okay, so like I said, at the end of each show now, time permitting, we're going to look at history of countries like we did after the John the Beast McGarvey profile Friday. We looked at a little short history of the United States. Today it's going to be Mexico. Short boxing history of Mexico. Pardon me for one moment, please. Okay. Yay. Okay. Short boxing history of Mexico. Mexico. Okay. Let's do that. How's everybody this Monday afternoon? Starting another week of boxing history off. It's going to be a big one. Mexican boxing history, culture, and tradition now. And then we're going to have something on Marquez Morales. So the short thing on their trilogy again. We covered it before, but yeah, good little piece on it. I just know Canelo and that's I don't know who the rest of them people is. Is that Figueroa? I don't know. But it's Canelo on the left. But they're all great Mexican fighters. Mexican boxing, history, and tradition. Now, let me take a drink. Get my throat cleared up. Appreciate y'all. Yeah, Mike Masick called it. Mike said Keith was getting stopped. Now, Mike don't make a lot of predictions a lot of time, but when he makes them, he's usually right. Mike said Keith was getting stopped, then he got stopped. Yeah. Now, in Mexico, boxing holds a meaning that goes beyond the boundaries of sport. Okay? It is a cultural phenomenon deeply rooted in society, particularly in disadvantaged neighborhoods where many young people view boxing as a real opportunity for social redemption. Gyms are often run by former boxers or experienced coaches, and they become gathering places and life schools, passing on values such as discipline, honor, and the spirit of sacrifice. In the ring, the boxer's heroism takes on strong symbolic value. The fighter does not represent themselves, but also the people who see in them the hope of a shared victory. Every success is perceived as the triumph of an entire community, and the boxer becomes an example to follow, a model of determination and courage in a context often characterized by inequalities and economic hardship. Now, the Mexican boxing style. Mexican boxing style. Perhaps the most iconic element of Mexican boxing is the so-called Mexican style. It is not a strictly defined concept, but rather a set of characteristics that make a boxer trained in Mexico immediately recognizable. These include offensive aggression, constant pressure on the opponent, a preference for body shots, and an enormous ability to take and react to blows. While Mexican boxing is often associated with a relentless pace and great physical endurance, there's no shortage of athletes capable of combining technique and defensive cunning. This very style, combined with undeniable willpower, has made Mexican boxers famous worldwide for the determination and the spectacle they bring to fights. Now, the great names of Mexican boxing. Talk about some of the great names of Mexican boxing. A little piece on boxing in Mexico today. We're going to do that at some ends of shows now, time permitting. The great names of Mexican boxing. Among the champions who have made the history of Mexican boxing is Julio Cesar Chavez, considered one of the greatest boxers of all time for his world titles in different weight categories and the records he set in the ring. Other legendary names include Salvador Sanchez, Ruben Olivares, Eric Morales, Marco Antonio Barrera, and Juan Manuel Marquez, all protagonists of epic fights that have left their mark on collective memory. Now today, the legacy of these athletes is carried on by Canelo Alvarez, a modern champion, capable of winning titles in multiple weight classes. His victories continue to make the Mexican flag wave proudly in international rings, confirming the rich tradition that the country holds in the world of boxing. Now, the importance of boxing events in Mexican culture, okay? The importance of boxing events in Mexican culture. Boxing events in Mexico are experienced as major popular events, followed by millions of fans on TV or gathered in homes and venues. The atmosphere during these showdowns is reminiscent of major soccer matches, chants, flags, and a tangible passion that surrounds the ring. Historic arenas such as the Arena Mexico and the Arena Coliseo have earned a special place in the collective imagination, becoming symbols of boxing passion and the stage for fights that have rightfully become part of history. High-profile events also draw the attention of international media, helping to cement Mexico's reputation as a cradle of formidable boxers. The gyms and the training of future champions in Mexico. The gyms and the training of future champions in Mexico. Let me refresh this chat. See that? It won't move by itself. Oh, Sugar. Okay, old school got Sugar Ray's second all-time favorite. Okay, Sam Langford was a damn good fighter. Okay, I'm gonna check them out, old school. Them two videos. As soon as I finish. Yeah, Paul was a bad man. See all the stuff I missed. And old school says, I keep saying that Sugar Ray Robinson and Roy Jones could have had a kid together. It would be Boots. I'm serious. That's a good point, good observation there, old school. Okay, the gyms and the training of future champions in Mexico. Now, the gyms are the beating heart of Mexican boxing. Often located in peripheral neighborhoods, they offer boys and increasingly girls the chance to train, find motivation, and learn values such as discipline, respect for opponents, and the spirit of sacrifice. Training includes running, bag work, sparring, and strength conditioning, but also mental education. They teach us how to manage stress and emotions. Training in a Mexican boxing gym means becoming part of a family, where the coach becomes a mentor and training partners learn to support each other. It is in these places that future champions are born, dreaming of following in the footsteps of the great names in the nation's boxing history. Now, Mexico is famous also for making boxing gloves. Okay, they make some great boxing gloves down there. The glove brands and Mexican craftsmanship. Let's talk about that. Now, an often underestimated but fundamental aspect in understanding the fame of boxing in Mexico is the quality of local craftsmanship. Gloves produced in the country are among the most highly regarded in the world for their durability, the quality of materials, and attention to detail. Cleto Reyes is the leading brand known for high quality leather, compact padding, and strong stitching. Okay, let's talk about some of the brands. Okay, I'm gonna give it a couple of hours, old school. Let's talk about some of these brands of these boxing gloves in Mexico. Yeah, because they're known for gloves down there. Okay. Excuse me for one moment. I'm putting them in there. Y'all know what I'm talking about. Oh. One moment. So I keep putting T. Damn. Okay. And box COTM. There we go. Those are the brands. We're going to talk about some of the brands of the gloves they make down in there. Okay. Cleto Reyes. Synonymous with excellence used by international champions. Z-Pole. Artisan workmanship and great longevity. Sayer. Comfortable gloves with a particular focus on wrist and knuckle protection. COTM. Durable and with a classic design, gaining popularity among amateurs. And choosing a pair of Mexican gloves is not just a matter of performance, but also a way to embrace the tradition of a country that has made boxing a symbol of international pride. And the contemporary evolution of Mexican boxing. There's two current Mexican fighters right there. Manuel Navarrete on the left, Oscar Valdez on the right. The contemporary evolution of Mexican boxing. With the advent of social media and streaming platforms, boxing has become a global phenomenon, and Mexican boxers have adapted to this new reality. Fights are promoted through digital channels, reaching an increasingly large audience. Nevertheless, the essence of boxing in Mexico remains tied to dedication, daily hard work, and the passion that permeates the gyms. The major arenas and local promoters continue to organize fights that excite fans, while young boxers train to write new chapters in this centuries-old story. The allure of Mexican boxing remains intact, born of a combination of tradition, technique, and irrepressible will to win. Now, women's boxing in Mexico. We got to cover the women. Okay, now that's Amanda Serrano on the left and Erica Cruz on the right. Puerto Rico versus Mexico. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Women's boxing in Mexico. Women, too, have found in boxing a discipline through which to express talent and determination. Mexican women's boxing is on the rise, thanks to fighters who have won world titles and shown a spotlight on a growing movement. For many athletes, boxing becomes a tool of empowerment, a path that shows how courage and passion can break down cultural barriers. And finally, stories of life and redemption. That's Salido. Yeah, Perro told me his story. He said he was like on his own when he was 12 years old or something. And made it all the way to be Orlando Salido, standing up to become a world champion. Great Mexican boxer. Stories of life and redemption. Mexican boxing abounds with personal stories in which success in the ring coincides with escaping poverty or marginalization. Many champions come from difficult backgrounds and have built their careers through extraordinary willpower. These tales of tenacity and perseverance are an integral part of boxing's allure, illustrating how this sport can become a powerful vehicle for social change. An analysis of classic rivalries. What's more classic? The net rivalry. Mexican versus Mexican. Mexico versus Mexico. Right there. Barrera and Morales. Analysis of the classic rivalries in Mexico. The history of Mexican boxing is filled with thrilling rivalries, both internal and international. Fights like those between Erik Morales and Marco Antonio Barrera have generated media buzz and divided fans, while also delivering top-level fights. Showdowns with fighters from other boxing countries, such as the American or Filipinos, the United States or the Philippines, or Puerto Rico, for example, the famous Marquez-Pacquiao duels. And these fights have reinforced the image of Mexican boxers as valiant fighters who never give up. And thoughts for the future. Thoughts for the future. Has a bright future. There's Rafael Espinoza, great young Mexican champion, 126, right there on the right. Thoughts for the future. Despite its glorious tradition, Mexican boxers must look to the future with caution. Challenges such as corruption, doping, or the search for a balance between business and sportsmanship are pressing issues that require appropriate solutions. At the same time, technological developments and greater global visibility can offer new opportunities, allowing Mexican boxers to reach a broader audience and renew the appeal of the sport. The passion and identity surrounding Mexican boxing do not seem destined to fade. From neighborhood gyms to grand arenas, boxing continues to represent a symbol of strength, sacrifice, and national pride, ready to write new chapters in a centuries-old story that still has much to tell. Okay, now let's talk about this trilogy here, Morales and Barrera. But excuse me for a minute. For 1 minute. Right back. Guardian, Herrera versus Morales. The Guardian, Herrera versus Morales. Okay, I'm back. Okay, I'm back. We're back. Sorry about that. Let's finish this off. We're back. Let's finish this off, okay? Today. Ooh. Herrera and Morales now, okay? Nice little piece we got here between these two great champions. I don't know why it's doing this, but hey. Always something, but we're going to get it in. Okay, so the trilogy of fights between Marco Antonio Barrera and Eric Morales contains some of the greatest rounds ever fought, with their personal and professional rivalry reaching its frenetic peak in the 11th round of their final fight in 2004. In the opening years of the 21st century, a mutual antipathy between two future Hall of Famers festered and then flourished down in Mexico as Marco Antonio Barrera and Eric Morales rose triumphantly through the weight divisions. So did their dislike for one another, and it appeared to increase exponentially. Unusually for pro boxing, this shared enmity was both absolute and entirely genuine. Nothing was manufactured, and media hyperbole was rendered redundant as the rivalry reached an intensity that is relatively and mercifully rare in a sport where the most prized goal is to temporarily render an opponent unconscious, okay? The most beautiful paradox of boxing is that the bonds forged and respect earned through mano-a-mano ring conflict tend to douse any flames of hatred before they can fully consume either protagonist. 12 3-minute rounds generally provide enough time to settle personal or professional differences and agree about lateral truths, however fragile, uneasy, or grudging that peace agreement may be. For Morales and Barrera, however, even 36 rounds of furious glove negotiations proved hopelessly inadequate. When the final chapter of their 4-year fistic trilogy was complete, the two fighters still hated each other's guts, okay? Still hated each other's guts when it was all said and done. Charles says, yeah, they did, old school. And Charles says this was the best classic of matchups of all time. A lot of people think so, Charles, yeah. But they still hated each other's guts. And the genesis of the animosity is disputed to this day. Barrera, the older man by almost 3 years, turned pro at age 15 and claimed the world super bantamweight title at a time when Morales, who didn't fight professionally until the ripe old age of 16, was still knocking out unknown fighters in Baja, California, when Barrera won his first title, right? With the light of the iconic Julio Cesar Chavez's star finally beginning to dim, heir apparent to the throne, Barrera was looking forward to assuming the mantle of Mexico's premier pugilistic hero. In the meantime, Morales' emergence, coupled with a brace of chastening defeats to the American Junior Jones, threatened Barrera's coronation, and some believed the seeds of rancor was sown and germinated in the fertile soils of this mini-career crisis. Okay. For others, it was simply the inevitable result of the two boxers' distinct backgrounds, an unavoidable class war with the added spice of regional rivalry thrown in for good measure. Morales, the working-class street kid from the ghettos of Tijuana, was never going to get along with Barrera, the educated, middle-class big city boy from El Distrito Federal. Yeah, they said they were never going to get along. Two different backgrounds. But whatever the spark that ignited the fire, both men played their full part in fanning the flames. Now, months before their first encounter, an altercation at a soccer match in Mexico almost became physical. Barrera then referred to Morales using a racially sensitive term, while Morales was never slow to unleash personal insults, came up on a zone in which neither mothers nor wives were off limits. And then blows were exchanged before their second fight, when Eric called Marco Antonio Mariquita, and later futile attempts at reconciliatory handshakes were met with flying water bottles. Met by flying water bottles. So these two dudes just didn't like each other. But they ended up good though. They ended up good. Yep. Excuse me for a minute. Okay, here we go. That's what I was trying to do. Got it. That is much better. Okay. Now, even more telling than these highly visible manifestations of the bad blood coursing through both fighters' veins was the look in their eyes when they met and the tone of their voice when faced to speak about the other. Such body language cannot be faked. It had all become very, very personal. But if their behavior outside the ring left a lot to be desired, it was impossible to fault them once they stepped into the squared circle. The first fight took place in the Mandalay Bay Hotel on February 19, 2000, and was immediately recognized for what it was, a standalone classic tear-up. In starting off quick and aggressive, and then getting faster and more furious, it set the tone for the entire trilogy. Ring Magazine crowned it Fight of the Year, and the fifth round was awarded Round of the Year. At the end of 36 relentless minutes, Morales took a split decision victory and the WBO Super Bantamweight strap. And he added that to the WBC belt he had won 3 years earlier. Part 2. 26 months later, one weight class north and a mile down the Las Vegas Strip at the MGM Grand, and is regarded as the most tactical of the three fights. Okay, But make no mistake, Barrera Morales too was again ferocious, and this time Barrera received the unanimous nod to snatch the WBC featherweight belt from around his rival's waist. So Barrera wins too. Okay, so now the fight is at one fight apiece, and everyone in the boxing world was certain that neither man would settle for their series to end in a draw. All the ingredients for a classic finale were already in the pot, but just like the best slow-cooked meals, it was set aside for an extended simmering period to allow all the compelling flavors to infuse and intensify. Set aside to marinate. Over the next 2 years, Barrera beat stellar names such as Johnny Tapia, Kevin Kelly, and Paulie Ayala, but lost to a young up-and-coming fighter from the Philippines named Manny Pacquiao. And Morales was even busier, and a 6-fight winning streak included the scalp of Jesus Chavez and a world title in a 3rd weight class for Morales. Okay, 3rd weight class. That WBC super featherweight title that he won was on the line when Marco Antonio and Eric returned to the MGM Grand on November 27th, 2004. But it was almost an aside. Legacies, pride, bragging rights, and national standing in a country that holds their little fighting men in such high esteem was what made this conclusion so highly anticipated. Yeah, that's what the belt, they didn't even need to have a belt on the line between these two warriors. Thomas Hill in the building. What's up, Thomas Hill? Yeah, we finishing up. Talk a little bit more about Barrera and Morales. Salute, Thomas Hill. Let's finish this off. Okay. Yeah, they didn't need to have no belt on the line for this fight. It could have been for nothing. Just the legacy, the pride, bragging rights. Okay. And both of them was trying to be the next man for Mexico after Julio Cesar Chavez had just retired, right? Yeah. No belt was necessary. Now, Morales, the younger and naturally bigger man, was the favorite going into the 3rd fight. This was Barrera's first fight at 130 pounds. And when the opening bell rang, Morales was said to be 11 pounds heavier than Barrera. And to put that in perspective, only 10 pounds separates flyweight, super flyweight, bantamweight, and super bantamweight. 4 weight divisions. Morales came in with 11-pound weight advantage over Barrera in this one, in the 3rd fight. That's the natural younger and bigger man anyway. Morales was, yeah. Nevertheless, Barrera was the aggressor early on, as he immediately took the fight to Morales. This move was both tactical and instinctive. As the shorter man with a distinct reach disadvantage, Barrera knew he had to fight at close quarters to deny the Ranger Morales the space to fully leverage his punches. But it is equally true that Barrera simply loved an old-fashioned toe-to-toe brawl, too. It is often difficult to neatly pigeonhole the characters of great fighters, and they really abide by the cliches prepared for them. Now, Barrera may have enjoyed a comfortable upbringing and studied law in Mexico City, But once in the ring, his approach was more emotional than cerebral. Morales was from the other side of the tracks, yet was a boxer puncher rather than an innate brawler. Regardless, stripped both to their core, and the same spirit was evident. They were both natural-born warriors. Okay? Both natural-born warriors. Bottom line. Okay, yeah. 5 seconds before the beginning of the 11th round, referee Kenny Bayless was already positioned in the center of the ring, looking from one corner to the other with his arm outstretched. And this was the big round here, the 11th. I think it won round of the year. Kenny was ready. The two fighters rose in unison to await the bell. As Morales stepped forward, he quickly blessed himself in a solid offering. They may have been seeking guidance, giving thanks, begging forgiveness, or some combination of all three. He knew that his rally in the 7th and 8th rounds had been thwarted by Barrera in the 9th and 10th, and the fight was clearly slipping away from him. Okay? Morales knew he had to come on in these last 2 rounds, because Barrera was coming on strong at that point. When the round began, Morales shot out a rapier left jab that Barrera ate before immediately responding with 2 of his own. They circled and feinted, both eager to get off first, but both equally worried of the counters that would inevitably be thrown in return. Again, Morales forced the issue and followed another decisive jab lead with attempted right hooks and uppercuts. Barrera burrowed in close for momentary refuge. Almost every other boxer on the planet would have held on at this point, and conscious of this fact, the daintily gloved Bayless swooped in like an attentive maitre d', seeing to the whims of his most important guest. Upon arrival, he found his services unrequired, however, as a visibly exhausted Barrera preferred to punch himself his way out of danger. Okay? Yeah, Barrera wasn't trying to hold on. He said, I'm going to punch my way out of this. Okay, so punch his way out of danger. A tired and wild uppercut from Barrera didn't miss his intended target by such a distance that both men briefly paused as if to check and recalibrate their equipment. Bayless then waved them in to commence a 30-second burst, which surged upward in intensity throughout. In and out of range, they bounced and jabbed until Morales landed one with a little extra bite. The sight of Barrera's head whipping back further than the norm was all the initiation Morales needed to attack. A flurry of yellow-gloved fists blurred the center of the ring, and only the occasional violent jolts of Barrera's head told us Morales was landing the cleanest shots. The Morales fans in the audience, sensing the stoppage was near for their man, was on their feet suddenly, and they found their voice inside the MGM. Yet, despite Morales catching Barrera repeatedly and dodging little in the way of meaningful punishment in return, it was he who found himself being back toward the ropes. A dog-tired Barrera was incredibly continuing to move forward. It was as if his fight or flight mechanism was faulty and it stuck fast on one setting, forward. Kenny Bayless was now a passerby, trying unsuccessfully to break up a street fight. Morales threw ambidextrous hooks to the head while Barrera dug into the body. Morales needed a knockout, while Barrera just needed to hang in there. The latter decided that his best chance of achieving that goal was to stay close and limit the possibilities of catching a big one. Doing so, he would absorb a high volume of punishment, but he banked on his chin and heart to cope. They did, and then some. Yep, his heart paid off for him. Sure did. Each time Bayless pushed the men apart, they were immediately drawn back to one another, like a pair of oppositely charged molecules in an ionic bond. They were doomed lovers, seeking one final embrace before being separated forever. As the seconds ticked down, the action became more desperate. Every time Morales hit his target and gave himself hope, Barrera thumped in a liver shot to keep his opponent honest. With 17 seconds left, it was Barrera who landed big upstairs as the left hook crashed into the side of Morales' jaw. In a surefire indication, they had felt the full force of the blow. Morales dropped his hands to his sides, banged his gloves together, and brazenly motioned Barrera in for more. Barrera obliged with an overhand right before technique went out the window in the final few seconds. Spent careening across the ring, blindly swinging Hail Marys at each other. There was still a round to go, but deep down, both men knew. 3 minutes later, Barrera was awarded a majority decision. Yep, both men knew. Objectively speaking, there may well have been better rounds than this one over the course of the 3 fights. But context is everything. This wasn't an 11th round. It was a 35th round to the series. This wasn't a standalone fight. It was an equal third of a series. A series in which no comfort would ever be taken for having claimed 1 victory out of 3. You only needed to look at the dissolute look in Morales' expression as he stood in his corner listening to Michael Buffer announce the result to understand that in the end, 3 minutes were the most decisive. Perhaps today, 22 years later, enough of the disappointment has subsided to allow Morales to appreciate the fact that he was one half of one of the greatest trilogies in boxing history. Some people say it was better than Muhammad Ali versus Joe Frazier, whose second fight was not all that special. Some say it was better than Tony Zell versus Rocky Graciano, whose meetings never went past the 6th round. Some say better than Emil Griffith versus Bernie Parrott, whose ending was too tragic to truly celebrate their battles. Some say even better than Mickey Ward and Arturo Gatti, who delivered comparable passion and action and entertainment. But they were clearly operating at a lower level, well below the elite echelons of the 2 Mexican fighters. clearly at a level below. Okay. All right. For many, that is what gives the Barrera Morales saga the edge. In those moments when the stakes were highest and a slightly more circumspect approach may have been forgiven, they simply went all out and blessed us with 3 fights of their special brand of paradoxically frenetic yet controlled and accurate aggression that the great Mexican fighters specialize in. And most surprising of all, there was even a heartwarming end to the tale. Now, amid sporadic rumors, thankfully unfounded, of a 4th meeting, the 2 men made their peace 6 years after the final punches were traded. Things happened, but we are friends now, confirmed Morales, before adding that time heals all wounds. Echoing those sentiments, Barrera insisted that all the ill feeling from the past had been forgotten. I respect Eric, he said. He is my friend. And there you have it. Eric Morales, Marco Antonio Barrera. And what's up, Al Booger in the building? Okay. Tomorrow, we're going to look at some epic fights from the 1990s. That's going to be tomorrow. But I appreciate everybody that stopped by today. We had Al Booger, Thomas Hill, Mike Rim, Mike Mazik, Jaw, my cousin Jaw, that is, Ken Saw Love One, Old School, Miss Cass. Yeah, Jaw asked me Friday. He said his grandfather, same last Eugene Sewell Jaw. My sister said she heard of him. So wow. And we both from Baltimore, so wow. Me and Jaw are likely related. Told y'all a long time ago, Jaw was one of my favorite people. And now likely my cousin. But salute, Jaw. Okay, that's it for today though. Tomorrow is going to be some 1990s fights. Wednesday, we're going to talk some more about the 90s, some of the iconic fighters and their backgrounds, their stories. Thursday, we're going to look at a history of the Golden Gloves. And now this week is the first Friday of the month. So the profile is going to be an active fighter. It's going to be Teron Boots Ennis. Okay. Appreciate you, Old School. Hope you feel better. Old School in the building today. He was off work. Said he wasn't feeling too good, but Friday nights at 10 p.m. Old School and D1 do their thing, the Angry White Men. Great podcast. One of the best podcasts in these YouTube streets. Okay. But I know we all already subscribe to them and know about the Angry White Men. Okay, but I appreciate everybody for stopping through today. We'll be back tomorrow. If it's Monday through Friday, 2 p.m., it's the Boxtorian bringing you all that boxing history. Everybody have a great afternoon. I appreciate y'all 1,000,000%.